two black teens, two first-class seats, one entitled woman who thought her status was enough to erase their rights. What started as a peaceful flight turned into a storm of privilege, silence, and injustice, until Julian and Ava Robinson, just 16 and 14, chose to stay seated and stand for something far greater. Their quiet defiance shook an entire airline and reminded the world, dignity isn't reserved for the wealthy. It belongs to the brave. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful true stories that make your heart race and your spirit rise. Julian Robinson adjusted the cuff of his blazer as he stepped into the first-class cabin of Flight 781 to London, his eyes sweeping over the luxurious cream leather seats and polished fixtures with a mix of curiosity and restraint. At 16, he was calm and self-assured, having inherited his mother's poised demeanor. But today was special. This wasn't just a flight, it was a milestone. Behind him trailed his younger sister, Ava, age 14, whose braided hair swayed slightly as she walked, her eyes wide, absorbing everything with the quiet reverence of someone stepping into a different world. Their mother, Marianne Robinson, had gifted them these first-class tickets, seats 1A and 1B, as a celebration of Julian's early acceptance into Columbia University and Ava's top scholarship award for her writing. As they reached their seats, Julian gently guided Ava toward the window. "You take 1A," he said, offering a small smile. "You've earned it." Ava hesitated for a second, then smiled back, her face lighting up like the soft ambient lighting above them. She sank into the plush seat and looked around in awe. "It feels like sitting inside a dream," she whispered, running her hand along the armrest. Julian chuckled. "Yeah, let's just not spill anything on the dream." A flight attendant with an elegant bun and a tailored navy blue uniform approached. "Mr. and Miss Robinson?" she said, addressing them with a formality that made Ava straighten in her seat. "Can I offer you a pre-departure drink? Perhaps some sparkling water or fresh squeezed juice?" "Orange juice, please," Julian replied, glancing at Ava for confirmation. She nodded, then looked out the large oval window as the airport tarmac buzzed in the distance, carts rolling by, service crew darting around like characters in a silent play. They clinked their plastic cups together like champagne glasses. "To new beginnings," Ava whispered. Julian nodded. "And to proving Mom right." They were both thinking the same thing, how proud their mother must have been, sending them off on this journey alone, trusting they'd carry themselves with integrity and grace. Marianne had always said that independence wasn't about being loud or aggressive, but about knowing when to speak, when to stay quiet, and when to stand your ground without apology. The cabin slowly filled with a quiet buzz of polite voices, a perfume of luxury and calm. Passengers arranged their coats, murmured to partners, or scrolled lazily through phones. A gentle melody played through the overhead speakers. Outside, the golden light of early evening filtered through the windows, casting soft shadows over the aisle. Ava pulled out a slim paperback from her tote bag, one of their mother's favorite books. Their eyes were watching God, and held it gently in her lap. Julian leaned back, letting the comfort of the seat surround him, eyes closing briefly as the engines hummed low in the background. "I'm not gonna lie," he murmured. "This might ruin economy class forever." Ava smiled but didn't answer. Her eyes were scanning the sky, her mind somewhere far above the clouds. Neither of them noticed the figure entering the cabin behind them, not yet. A tall woman, around her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a beige wool coat with gold buttons, stepped past the curtain and paused. She stood still for a moment, her heels planted firmly in the carpet, her mouth pressed into a tight line as her gaze locked onto 1A and 1B. Ava's peaceful moment broke slightly as she felt the air around them shift, a faint tension prickling her skin. She turned her head just as the woman began moving down the aisle, her eyes fixed on their seats with a certainty that didn't ask, it demanded. Julian opened his eyes, sensing the change, his smile fading. "Do you feel that?" Ava asked under her breath. "Yeah," Julian said, sitting up straighter. "Something's about to happen." And just like that, their quiet journey transformed into something else entirely. The woman's footsteps clicked with quiet authority as she approached the front row. She didn't glance left or right, didn't acknowledge the cabin crew, and certainly didn't smile. Her eyes, cold and calculating, were locked on the seats where Ava and Julian sat. She stopped just inches from them, folding her arms with practiced elegance. Her voice sliced through the soft hum of the cabin. "There's been a mistake," she said flatly. "Seats 1A and 1B are mine." Ava blinked, slowly lowering her book. Julian looked up, caught off guard but composed. "I'm sorry," he replied, polite but firm. The woman gave a small, clipped laugh, more of a scoff than amusement. "These seats are always mine. I've flown with Skyline Airways for over a decade. Executive Platinum. I sit here every flight. You must be new." Julian sat forward, keeping his tone calm. "We understand, ma'am, but we have these seats confirmed. They were booked weeks ago." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, as though the presence of two calm teenagers was more insulting than open defiance. "Name's Camilla Harding," she said, tilting her head. "Perhaps that will help the crew jog their memory. I'd hate for this to become a scene." A flight attendant, Grace Nguyen, appeared from behind the galley curtain, a folder clutched in her hand and nervousness written across her face. "Miss Harding," she said, trying to smile, "I assure you these seats were reserved under the names Ava and Julian Robinson. We double-checked the manifest." Camilla cut her off with a sharp gesture. "That may be what's on the manifest, but that's not what matters. These seats," she pointed with a manicured nail at the row, "are mine. You know that. Everyone knows that." Julian inhaled slowly, fighting the urge to roll his eyes. "I'm sure there's a solution," he said. "But these are our seats, legally confirmed." Camilla's lips curled. "Let's not pretend this is about legality. This is about tradition, about loyalty, and about respecting status." Her eyes locked on Ava now, scrutinizing the younger girl with disdain. And frankly, about keeping certain standards in place. Ava's grip on her book tightened slightly. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough, but her heart was pounding. A few passengers nearby began shifting uncomfortably. Some peeked from behind their headrests. One man cleared his throat loudly, pretending not to eavesdrop. Camilla seemed to thrive in the attention. "I've logged over 100 flights with Skyline," she continued, raising her voice slightly. "This seat is where I conduct business, where I've met senators and CEOs. And now you're telling me to sit behind a couple of children?" Grace turned helplessly toward her supervisor, Marcus Bell, who had just stepped into the cabin, trying to assess the tension. Marcus looked between the parties, his jaw tightening. "Let's all stay calm," he said quickly. "Perhaps the Robinsons would be willing to move to another available row. We do have 2 open seats further back in first class, still very premium." Julian turned sharply. "Why should we move?" His voice was still calm, but the edge was unmistakable now. "We did nothing wrong. These are our seats." Camilla exhaled dramatically, her annoyance growing. "Of course. Make the regulars adjust for the newcomers." Wonderful message. Ava finally spoke, her voice low but clear. "Respect isn't about how long you've sat in a seat, it's how you treat the people around you." That made Camilla pause. The words didn't come from defiance, but from something deeper, an unshakable understanding of self-worth. Marcus looked uncertain. Grace looked torn. Camilla looked furious. Julian met his sister's eyes. "We're not going anywhere," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Not because we're stubborn, because we're right." The cabin, once filled with muted luxury, now buzzed with tension, and behind it all the unspoken question lingered in the air like static. What happens when entitlement demands obedience, and no one gives it? Ava's hand trembled slightly as she slipped her phone from her tote bag, shielding it with her body from prying eyes. Her thumb hovered over the screen for a second, then tapped Mom with quiet urgency. The cabin buzzed with soft tension around her, Camilla's indignant posture towering over the 2 siblings like a storm cloud refusing to pass. Julian sat motionless beside her, his jaw clenched, his knuckles pale against the leather armrest. The call connected on the second ring. "Mom," Ava whispered, her voice low but steady. Marianne Robinson didn't waste time with greetings. "What's wrong?" Ava gave a quick glance toward Camilla, who was now speaking in hushed tones with Marcus Bell. "We're being told to move. A woman says our seats are hers and the crew isn't helping. They want us to be flexible." There was a pause, brief but thunderous in its intent. "Stay calm," Marianne said. "Let me handle it." Before Ava could respond, Julian leaned toward her. "She's on it, isn't she?" Ava nodded, his his lips pressed into a quiet, determined line. He looked up just as Marcus approached them again. "I want to thank you both for being composed," Marcus began, his voice an awkward blend of authority and apology. "We understand your concerns, but this passenger has flown with us for years. If you'd be willing to move 2 rows back, we could avoid further disruption and depart on time." Julian stood, his voice calm but powerful. "So let me get this straight. Because she has a longer history with the airline, you're willing to ignore the reservation system and push 2 paying passengers out of their rightful seats?" Marcus hesitated, the confidence in his voice dimming. "I'm just trying to maintain peace." "Peace without fairness isn't peace," Julian replied. "It's silence, and we're not going to be part of that." From behind them, Camilla chuckled. "He sounds rehearsed." Julian turned. "No, ma'am, I'm just raised right." The moment hung in the air like a taut wire, and Ava felt the eyes of half the cabin resting on them now. Some curious, some uncomfortable, some finally paying attention. Grace, the junior attendant, stood quietly in the background, her lips pressed together. She looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Then, like a ripple across the surface of tension, Camilla leaned against Marcus with an air of practiced entitlement. "I'd like to speak to the captain," she said. "This is getting absurd." Marcus looked stunned. "Miss Harding, the captain is preparing for departure." "Then delay it," she snapped. "I won't fly under these conditions." A few gasps rippled quietly through the cabin. A passenger in 3C muttered something under his breath, and another woman turned fully in her seat, now openly watching. Julian sat again, folding his hands in his lap. "Let her call whoever she wants. We're not moving." Camilla's lips twitched with frustration. She paced slightly in the aisle, then pulled out her phone and began typing furiously. Moments later, her voice returned, low but venomous. "This is the problem with giving first class to just anyone. They think a boarding pass means they belong." Ava flinched but didn't speak. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Marianne. "Put me on speaker," she said firmly. Ava tapped the screen, holding the phone between them. Julian nodded once. "You're on." Marianne's voice filled the small space around them, steady, low, unshaken. "My name is Marianne Robinson. These seats were purchased under my account. Confirmation numbers are recorded, payment completed, names listed. If anyone suggests otherwise, they are either misinformed or deliberately choosing to ignore protocol. And if these children are moved, rest assured, Skyline Airways will hear from me and the court within 24 hours. Even Camilla froze. Julian smiled faintly. "Thanks, Mom." "Hold your ground," she said. "Truth doesn't need volume. It just needs clarity." The call ended, but the echo of her words lingered. Grace finally stepped forward, her voice uncertain but audible. "Should I notify the flight deck?" Marcus sighed and nodded. "Yes, it's time." And in that moment, it became clear. This wasn't just about seats anymore. It was about what people believed they were entitled to, and what others were no longer willing to give up. 10 minutes later, the quiet murmur of the cabin was interrupted by the sharp click of polished shoes on the aisle floor. 2 men in tailored charcoal suits, each wearing sleek metal Skyline Airways ID badges, entered the first-class section with the precision of a legal strike team. Every eye turned to them. One carried a tablet, the other a small black folder with the unmistakable texture of authority. "Good evening," the older man said, his voice crisp. "I'm Elliot Graves, Senior Liaison for Executive Passenger Affairs. This is Cheryl Langston, Operations Compliance Officer. We're here on direct order from Skyline's Board of Ethics regarding an escalation involving seats 1A and 1B. Camilla Harding stood immediately, a self-satisfied smile spreading across her face. "Finally," she said. "Now maybe someone can do their job and remove these children from my seats." Elliot's eyes didn't even flinch toward her. Instead, he turned to Julian and Ava. "Julian Robinson." "Ava Robinson?" Julian rose calmly. "That's us." Cheryl nodded, scrolling through the tablet. "Booked under Marianne Robinson, paid in full on April 3rd, to confirm seats 1A and 1B. Julian didn't move, neither did Ava. They simply looked back at the officials, steady and poised. Elliot turned to Camilla now, his tone unchanged. "Miss Harding, are you claiming these seats were reserved under your name for this flight?" Camilla straightened her coat. "I always fly in 1A. I've sat there for over a decade. This is about principle, about respect for loyal travelers like me," Cheryl replied coolly. principle doesn't override confirmation. Camilla's smile faltered. So what, you're siding with children over your own elite members? No, Elliot said, still composed. We're siding with the truth, and the system doesn't make exceptions for age, race, or tenure. A hush spread across the cabin, and Cheryl added, her tone unflinching, your Platinum Elite status is hereby under review for conduct inconsistent with Skyline's Code of Passenger Ethics. Any further disruption will be grounds for immediate suspension. Camilla's face paled. You can't be serious. You're going to let them win? Elliot looked at Julian and Ava again. This isn't a game, and this isn't about winning. It's about honoring what's right. From behind them, Captain Louis Marshall finally stepped into view. His pilot's cap was tucked under one arm, his uniform sharp and clean, his expression unreadable. "Berieft," he said calmly. As captain of this aircraft, my responsibility is to ensure the safety, order, and fairness for every passenger on board. If this continues, and if passengers are harassed or pressured, I will not hesitate to delay takeoff until the matter is resolved through proper channels, including disembarkation if necessary. The implication was clear. Camilla's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted between the crew, the officials, and the passengers who now openly watched her with judgment rather than sympathy. Julian spoke at last, his voice level. Ma'am, you're welcome to sit in your assigned seat, but we're not giving up ours. Ava added quietly, we were taught to respect people, not positions. Camilla took a step back. Her confidence now wavered, her hands trembling as they clutched the edge of her purse. But even in that moment of reckoning, she still tried one last time. I'll call the CEO myself. Elliot gave a small, tight smile. You're late? He already called us. Silence fell like a final curtain. Cheryl stepped aside. Miss Harding, please take your assigned seat or prepare to disembark. Camilla didn't speak. She just stood there, rigid and humiliated. Julian and Ava sat down again, side by side, unshaken. This wasn't triumph, it was resolution. And as the overhead lights dimmed in preparation for takeoff, the entire cabin knew one thing for certain. Entitlement had lost. Dignity had stayed seated. The plane taxied toward the runway with a quiet hum as twilight cast a soft violet hue across the horizon. The cabin lights shifted to a warm glow, subtle and steady, like the calm after a storm. Julian and Ava Robinson remained seated in 1A and 1B, hands relaxed on their armrests, eyes forward. Not triumphant, but resolute. Around them, the tension that had once filled the air had thinned, replaced by a silence of collective reflection. Camilla Harding sat 3 rows behind them now, stone-faced and unmoving. She hadn't uttered a word since returning to her reassigned seat. The luxury she had clung to with so much fury now felt hollow, just another chair on a plane she no longer ruled. Her Platinum Elite status was gone, her reputation bruised. But the most profound loss was not printed on any card. It was the control she had once wielded with a glance, a title, a name. In the row across from Ava, an elderly woman leaned slightly toward her, her eyes kind beneath silver-framed glasses. You two showed more grace than I've seen from people 3 times your age, she said gently. Ava offered a small smile, humbled but composed. We just wanted to be treated fairly. Julian nodded beside her. That's all anyone should expect. Up front, the captain's voice came over the intercom, warm and steady. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Louis Marshall. Thank you for your patience and for remaining respectful during our brief delay. We are now cleared for takeoff. Please fasten your seatbelts and enjoy the flight. The wheels began to roll faster, humming louder beneath their feet. Ava looked out the window as the runway blurred, the lights stretching into golden streaks. The force of takeoff pressed them back into their seats, but in her chest, she felt something lighter rising. Not pride, not relief, just clarity, just peace. As the aircraft lifted into the air, Julian glanced at his sister. Do you think this changes anything? He asked softly. Ava considered the question. I think it already has. 3 days later, a formal announcement appeared at the top of Skyline Airways' website. Bold black letters read, a new commitment to equity, dignity, and passenger rights. The message detailed a revised training initiative for staff, mandatory cultural sensitivity workshops, and a new passenger ethics division that would function independently of marketing and loyalty programs. At the heart of the update was a single sentence. Every voice matters, no matter the seat number. The Robinson incident had sparked a wave, not of outrage, but of awakening. On social media, passengers praised the siblings for their grace under pressure. News headlines spoke not of scandal, but of a quiet reckoning in the sky. Two teens, one cabin, one unshakable stand for respect. Back in their family's Chicago home, Julian and Ava sat on the porch one evening, the hum of cicadas weaving through the fading daylight. A few newspapers lay on the table, their faces on the front pages, headlines circling their names. Neither of them touched them. "Mom asked if we'd be okay doing interviews," Ava murmured. Julian leaned back in his chair, watching the darkening sky. "What would we even say?" Ava smiled. "Just that we didn't stand up to make noise. We stayed seated to make a point." A moment of stillness passed. Then Julian added, "And if anyone asks why we didn't move, we tell them," Ava said, "because dignity isn't something you give up, just because someone says you don't belong." The wind stirred the trees gently above them, and in that moment, the world didn't feel changed by force or fury, but by two teenagers who simply knew who they were and refused to let anyone redefine it. And maybe that was how real change always begins. Quietly, firmly, seat by seat. This story is more than just about two teenagers defending their seats on a flight. It's about standing your ground when the world expects you to shrink. Ava and Julian Robinson didn't raise their voices. They didn't retaliate with anger. They responded with dignity, patience, and quiet strength. In a society that too often measures worth by privilege, connections, or appearances, these two young souls reminded us that true respect is not given based on loyalty cards or frequent flyer miles. It's earned through how we treat one another. The most powerful part of this journey wasn't the corporate apology, the revoked status, or the headlines that followed. It was the simple but unshakable truth that even young voices, when steady and anchored in what's right, can shift the course of a system. They didn't just win a battle in a cabin, they reignited a conversation that stretched far beyond 1A and 1B. Let this be a reminder: silence in the face of injustice is complicity, and courage doesn't always look loud. It often looks like two kids who stayed seated when the world tried to make them move. Now it's your turn. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another powerful journey like this one. Your voice matters. Let it be heard.